As the NATO Summit in Washington, D.C. slowly inches towards the second day, we have a guest coming in to tell us more about the Polish perspective of things. Like we promised, we'll be tackling this from all directions, starting from the most important eastern flank.
And joining us to discuss this is Aleksandra Wiśniewska, Polish MP from Civic Coalition. Hello and welcome to TPO.
Thank you very much for having me.
So first of all, I feel like Poland positions itself as a strong advocate for increased focus on Eastern Europe by NATO. So what are the main objectives, to your mind, Poland hopes to achieve at this NATO summit?
Absolutely. And I think that if I was to sum up in one sentence the objectives, of Poland on this NATO summit is to show unity and to deliver hope. And I think Poland sets a beautiful and a very powerful example to follow for other allies in these extremely difficult times, which is the defense spending. So Poland, as opposed to other allies, actually, we are currently spending 4%, over 4%, running to 5%, of our GDP, which is the highest amongst all NATO allies on defense spending. And we'd like to see, currently we see about 23 out of the 32 allies trying to reach the threshold, the 2%, but currently we, as Poland, believe that 2% is really the floor, not the ceiling. So first of all, it's money. So we want to see the increased defense spending as deterrence across all our allies. Then we'd like to see, of course, increased support to Poland as NATO's eastern flank. Currently we have approximately 12,000 soldiers, mostly American, and the Polish-American ties are currently stronger than ever. When it comes to transatlantic cooperation. We'd like to see also a center in Bydgoszcz, a new center of joint training analysis being set up in Bydgoszcz to support the NATO efforts. We'd like to see particular focus on common strategy on cybersecurity attacks and on hybrid threats and disinformation. Perhaps some of you know that Poland is currently in top 3 countries worldwide when it comes to the cyber attacks that we have to continuously fight back against. And of course, very clear bridge to NATO for Ukraine.
Right, these are all very good points and very important things to tackle. We see very high-profile Polish individuals like Defense Minister, Foreign Minister attending this NATO summit to achieve the goal that you were mentioning. However, things don't seem to go very smoothly as there were some hurdles when it comes to acquiring some of these funds needed to strengthen the eastern flank. Especially, we've seen Orban has voted to block some of these NATO funds coming into Poland. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, this is extremely unfortunate. We've already seen for quite a while Viktor Orban and Fidesz party in Hungary for a while blocking already essentially all the European and all the NATO efforts that are very clear on providing strong military support to Ukraine. Seeing the last unannounced visit of Viktor Orban's to President Putin has been particularly disheartening. However, I think that there is a bit of a silver lining in that. And the silver lining is that, whether Viktor Orban's Fidesz in Hungary or AfD in Germany or Marine Le Pen's party in France, that nationalist demon that has unfortunately been unleashed already in the French society, all these parties, what they have in common is Euroscepticism, dehumanizing rhetorics, especially against minorities or migrants, but also the strange fascination of Kremlin. And what we have to do is we have to continue to unmask their ties with Kremlin. We have to unmask this banality of evil and the danger. And Viktor Orban, by going to Putin and by showing up, for the photo open conference with Vladimir Putin, has himself done that already. So this is a very strong message to the alliance that we have to right now very strongly and very unifyingly condemned. And we are, of course, prepared to do so.
And of course, when we are looking at what has been happening on the eastern border between Poland and Belarus and the hybrid warfare, now we have to remember that it's also now the flank of NATO, eastern flank of NATO. So having that in mind, how has the response, what kind of response have we seen now from other NATO members regarding now the impact and on help protecting the eastern border, to your mind? How does it really pans out?
So as I'm sure if you have seen, our Prime Minister Donald Tusk had recently returned from the EU summit, when in fact one of the issues on the defense agenda has been continued support and new also additional financial support to the East Shield Initiative. East Shield Initiative is this very comprehensive, innovative program of reinforcing our eastern border with Belarus and of trying to have a very innovative systems that previously until now have not been really put in place to be able to protect the border, which is also, of course, the border of Schengen for Europe, while at the same time, as comparing especially to the previous government in power, we're trying to do so without using a dehumanizing narrative, that unfortunately Law and Justice, the previous government, have been using a lot in regards to migrants, while at the same time inviting on a fake visa scheme an enormous amount of people that we have not been able to actually, whose applications we have not been able to actually properly verify. So we're currently looking at enforcing security, but also communicating the hybrid threats that Poland is facing, which until now, to be frank with you, have not been properly communicated on the EU level, because frankly, we had very limited resources as a state for the past 8 years when it comes to international representation. And thankfully, we currently have our Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski and our Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who are extremely highly respected, both on the corridors of Brussels and Washington, to be able to strongly advocate for the support to Poland, for the support for Polish-Belarusian border, and also showing the ties between Lukashenko, between Putin, now between, unfortunately, Viktor Orban, that we have to unmask, that we have to condemn and unifyingly respond to.
Right, and speaking of international representation, we are looking down at a very turbulent time. 2024 is a year of elections, and going into this NATO summit, we see a lot of political earthquakes, shakeups, different change of government than that of last year, and a lot of things to adapt to. But one thing I do notice is when it comes to this political situation in Poland, seems to be relatively stable when it comes to dealing with the United States. Or through these years, doesn't really matter which side of the aisle we're talking about. The relation with the United States seems to be very warm, and the Polish president has also came out and said that it doesn't matter who is going to be in charge in office in the United States going forward. For Poland, it stays relatively the same. What have we done here in Poland to kind of stabilize this political situation to keep us from being kind of battered around by the turbulent wave of politics when it comes to defense?
Yes, so absolutely. When it comes to our transatlantic relations, as mentioned, actually Polish-American relations currently are stronger than ever. When you look at the statistics and data, according to, for instance, the PW research, 93% of Poles are favorable when it comes to the how we perceive United States. So we have this history of Atlanticism, of philosophy of Atlanticism in Poland. Starting from Ronald Reagan to Woodrow Wilson, to seeing actually strong roles and positive role of United States when it comes to Polish history, Polish independence, Polish fight against communism, And myself on the level of the parliament, I have the privilege of leading up the Polish-American Friendship Group, and where we host, starting from the state legislators, from different states, recently from Massachusetts, over 20 state legislators coming to Polish parliament to visit us to understand our challenges and the Polish interest, especially as well when it comes to the current war between NATO and Russia, and also when it comes to our economic relations, So America has been an absolutely crucial ally, critical ally when it comes to modernization of Polish economy, especially of the Polish army, of course. And we'd like to see, regardless of whoever is going to be elected into the White House, and we will not meddle inside the internal politics of our critical ally, of course. We'll support whoever is going to be elected and we'll work with them. We just hope, of course, that all the principles of democracy are going to be upheld, because they are dear to us. And we'd like to see the United States continue their role, as a leader of NATO, and as also a leader of liberal democracies, especially in the time when the liberalism and democracy are, to be frank with you, probably threatened more than ever, at least more than ever in my adult life, And we see this the danger of increasingly autocratic forces and increasing nationalist voices happening in Europe, but also in the East, in the Indo-Pacific as well, And we have to understand also the critical interest of the United States on the Indo-Pacific. And actually this NATO summit on Thursday, so just tomorrow, is about to address the issue of our NATO allies in the Indo-Pacific, such as, Japan and New Zealand, Australia, that are not within NATO, but that NATO keeps close relations with, to understand their strategic interest in the Indo-Pacific, and especially the situation between China and Taiwan.
And you mentioned the fact that now Poland has a special role with unmasking now the schemes that we see. So how do you see now this coordination between Poland and other now Eastern European member states panning out? How do you see this cooperation going?
I think that one thing which is quite empowering and that we all as a society can be proud of is that Poland very clearly emerges as a very strong leader of Eastern Europe, but also leading the Balkan nations who, to a certain extent, face similar threats, especially from Russia, like we do, like Finland, for instance, And I think that especially when you look at the Weimar Triangle as well, and when you look at the currently difficult political situations in France, after the elections as well, with different very strong forces, cohabiting in France, and the recent visit of Olaf Scholz to Warsaw, we see that on the level of the Weimar Triangle, Germany, Poland, France, Poland is actually emerging as a very strong balancing power, And here, not only we remain the logistics, security and humanitarian key to Ukraine, but we can also be a strong advocate because we understand the threat of Russian imperialism, like very few other nations, And here, I positively hope, that Poland will be able to continue to advocate the interests of the entire Eastern Europe, of Ukraine, of the Eastern European states, and of ourselves very strongly, very assertively, like we probably have never done before as a modern democracy, because the geopolitical situation calls us as a nation to a very high responsibility. It calls us to difficult decisions as policymakers. Just today, for instance, in the level of the parliament, I'll be working with my colleagues on continued works on the total defense of our civic society, because Russia is having total attacks, and we see it on civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. I have to be prepared in Poland as well.
All right, so yeah, a lot of things to cover. And of course, like you said, Poland does play a very, very important role going forward. And I think the NATO allies would be glad to have someone to advocate for themselves on the eastern flank of the country.
Indeed, Aleksandra Wiśniewska, Polish MP from Civic Coalition, was our guest today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Appreciate it. And now we are going to move on to the weather for a very short break, but we have more coming up. So please stay tuned to TVP World. We'll be right back.